officials. This is now 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 16th of March, 2022, and we are here to deliberate on the budget of the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. And it is my privilege as chairperson, Andrikus van der Westhuizen, to welcome you all to this meeting. I hope, and I'm looking forward to a constructive engagement on this budget vote as proposed to us as committee to deal with. So on our agenda, we first have the deliberation on the vote. Then we also intend to let the draft report serve in front of us for consideration. And honourable members, then there will also be an opportunity to raise general issues that you may want. We are all familiar with the MS Teams function. Thank you very much for everybody that joined us this afternoon. Can I just ask that particularly where we are a number of people in one room, that we ensure that we keep our microphones on mute. I believe that Minister Bradell and the officials are together in one facility with excellent IT infrastructure, and I presume that the facility in itself will have a microphone and that it will not be necessary for individual persons to unmute their microphones on their laptops. I think if you unmute yourself on the microphone in front of you on the desk, that should be sufficient. I have only received one apology, and that is from member Lorraine Botha, who is currently attending another meeting of a standing committee. And I was informed that our deputy speaker would be standing in for her. And I want to in advance say thank you very much, Honourable Schaefer, also for your participation in this meeting. It's strange for me to have our roles reversed. Normally, I'm the one in the meetings that you chair, but I hope you will also feel welcome, and please feel free to also participate. You're an alternate member, and therefore today you are a member with full voting rights, so you are most welcome. Thank you, Minister Bradell. A special word of welcome also to you and your senior officials, Ms. Karen Shippey, who is currently acting as HOD, and Dr. Azina Umar, the CEO of Cape Nature. And Minister, perhaps if you would allow me just to give all the members first an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then you will get an opportunity to also speak. Honourable members, those of you that are on this platform, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and colleagues. I'm Gillian Postman, a member of this committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members and Minister and Chair. I'm Beverly Schaefer.
Good. Welcome. I saw some other members as well.
Good afternoon, Chair and everyone else. Pet Moran, member of this committee.
Good. Thank you very much. Any other members that would like to introduce themselves that have joined us?
Good afternoon, Chair. Daniel Smith. Thank you.
You're most welcome, Honourable Smith. Good. And then, Minister, you've already been welcomed as in your capacity as Minister also for Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. If you would allow me, I'm going to give Ms. Karen Shippey an opportunity to also introduce the team that came to this meeting to support her as well, unless Shippey, you would like each one to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think because we have new members on the committee, it might be a good idea for us to each introduce ourselves so that you can put a face to the name. So my name is Karen Shippey. I am acting HOD at the moment, as well as being Chief Director Environmental Sustainability.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ronald Tapelo Musume, the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Gerard Gerber, Chief Director, Development Planning.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair, members. Gottlieb Arnse, Chief Director, Environmental Quality.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Johannes Fritz, Director, Financial Management.
Good afternoon, Chair, members. Anwar Ghafoor, Director, Strategic and Operational Support.
Thank you. And then those staff who are online, if we can go alphabetically quickly.
I'm far down the line. My surname is Kruger, Johan Kruger, from the RCEP program, the Regional Socioeconomic Program. I'm standing in for your Francois Wust, who is our program manager. He's currently on site visits in the Southern Cape. Thank you.
Catherine? You're on mute.
Apologies, Catherine Stone. I'm the Director of Spatial Planning in the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. Thank you.
Ms. Marie.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I'm Advocate Charmaine Maria. I am the Director for Environmental Governance.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Helena Jacobs. I'm the Director for Development Planning, Intelligence Management Research and the Chief Directorate Development Planning.
I'm still missing a few people that I do see that are online.
Good afternoon, Paul Hardcastle, Director Planning and Policy Coordination. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. Joy Lena, Air Quality Management Director. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and Honourable Members. Marlene Leross, Director for Biodiversity and Coastal Management in the Department. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. Wilna Kloppers, Director Pollution and Chemicals Management.
Thank you. Are we ready to go over to Cape Nature? Dr.
Good
Regina
afternoon. I am Regina Omar, the CEO of Cape Nature.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Woods. I am the Executive Director of Biodiversity and Development.
Good afternoon, I'm Rowena Vaughan. I'm General Manager, Human Resources, Cape Nature.
Good afternoon, Chair and everybody. Ernst Bart from Cape Nature, Executive Director for Conservation Operations.
Good afternoon, Mohammed Bayat, the CFO.
Good afternoon, Shiraz Ismail, Executive Director, Ecotourism and Access.
Thank you. Is that the team, Dr. Umar?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Thank you very much. We are honored by the presence of so many senior staff members, which I take as a sign of how important you see this meeting. And with that, I would like to hand over to Minister Bradell for some opening remarks.
Honourable Chair, thank you very much. Honourable members of the Standing Committee, our Acting Head of the Department, Karen Shippey, and our CEO of Cape Nature, Dr. Omar, thank you for joining me this afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to present the 2022-23 appropriation bill today for the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. Please see this budget as our local attempt to contribute to the global environmental challenges facing the world today. COP26 in Glasgow last year made it very clear that we are without any doubt affecting the environment in a negative manner. This was supported by the Global Risk Report in 2022. The report says that the next 5 years, societal and environmental risk are of the greatest concern. However, over the 10-year period, the health of the planet dominates, with environmental risk perceived to be the 5 most critical long-term threats to the world, as well as the most potentially damaging to people and the planet, with climate action failures, extreme weather, and biodiversity loss ranking as the top 3 most severe risks. Chairperson and honourable members, it is against this background that we have to plan how we use our Department of Environment and Development Planning's budget. I am satisfied that the priorities identified speak to the global challenges and the long-term risk. Colleagues, we will never have enough money, but we will do everything in our power to do more with the budget that we receive from Treasury. Honourable Chair, my team and I thank you for the opportunity to engage with the Standing Committee on the appropriation bill for the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning. I thank you.
Minister Bradell, Ms. Shippey, would you like to make some introductory remarks before we go over to the presentation of the vote?
Yes, thank you. And rather unusually this morning, we've actually got a presentation. I know normally we just give you a briefing note with the budget, but I think it's really important, especially for the new members on the committee, to see what we do with our budget. I think the worrying trend, obviously, as an accounting officer, is the fact that our budget is not increasing as much as our wage bill is. And while the actual negotiations are outside of our control, it means that we have less and less operational money year on year, which is always a concern. So both Cape Nature and ourselves have incredibly loyal and highly skilled teams who are working around the clock to do their jobs and to do them well. Because as Minister Bradell says, we can see the damage that is being done day by day to our environment. And it is very much a situation of having people who do not have services living in places that they should never have been in a lot of cases. And over COVID, we've seen that expand even further and threaten some of our protected areas, as well as a number of other sites in our province. It's not appropriate for us to be asking for more money constantly, knowing that there is no more in the kitty. So we will make do with what we have, but it is becoming harder and harder to stretch ourselves to all the tasks that we need to do to protect humanity from themselves. So we are going to be reflecting on the state of environment and the state of development planning, because we believe that for people to have dignity and services, we need to make sure that the environment is healthy enough to actually support that. And that's very much what the team has tried to do in this budget, trying to make sure that that is what we prioritize, irrespective of our particular legal mandate themes that we're working to. And with that, I'm going to be handing over to our new CFO, Ronald Tapelo Mtsome, who, this is his maiden meeting, in fact, as our CFO. So hopefully that means that we'll get very politely phrased questions to him later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shippey, and welcome to you, Mr. Mtsome. Can I just say, I did get a message that the venue that you are using, Ms. Shippey, will be experiencing an electricity cut early evening, and that we should aim to finish by 5 o'clock, unless you, otherwise you will have to go down 7 stairs of steps in the dark, which I wouldn't like to see happening. So if I could just point out to everybody that there is some time constraint. I don't want to limit any debate or information sharing, but if we could be succinct, I think that would be great. And with that, Mr. Mtsome, thank you, welcome. Hope you already feel welcome, and we're really looking forward to learning from you, and also to learn to know you better. Please proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, honorable members. The presentation is 22 pages. However, some slides will move quite quickly, because some of the information honorable members will already be familiar with the information. Chairperson, the overview of the presentation, we've broken down the presentation into 6 areas. Just briefly, the budget and alignment with the APP, the program structure, allocation of the budget, the department's budget, local government transfers, and the focus areas to demonstrate how the budget relates and aligns with the focus areas. Point 6 being the public entities budget, Chairperson. Chair, our budget is aligned to our program, APP program structure, as you would be aware. Program 1, administration. Program 2, environmental policy planning and coordination. Program 3, compliance and enforcement. Until program 7, Chair, development planning. So I won't spend too much time on the program structure. This is not an APP meeting, it's a budget meeting, but the information is all there, Chair. Chairperson, our budget for 2022-23 is 568.586. For 2023-24, it's 574,055. 2024-25, 589.355. An increase from 2021 to 2022 of 0.6%. Increase of 0.96, which is 1% from 2022-23 to 24. And an increase of 2.66%, 2.67% from 2023-24 to 2024-25. Chair, you would also note that the increases are not that substantial. We are still feeling the effects of COVID, pressure on the fiscus, and hence you see the lower increases below inflation, Chair. Chair, our own revenue, it's 2.9 million for 2022-23, 3 million for 2023-24, 2024-25. Our own revenue is 3.1 million, which comes to around 0.5% of our budget. 0.51% for 2022-23, 2023-24, 0.53%. And that revenue is mainly your fines and penalties resulting from Section 24G, where individuals or companies are commencing listed activities without prior environmental authorizations. Sale of goods, that one of 700,000, which is mainly your commission on insurances, rezoning fees, etc. Financial transactions, just your recoveries from unspent transfers, etc. So, which is quite minimum. Chair, the breakdown between our budget between the department and Cape Nature, our entity, you will see that the department for 2022-23 is 276.496 million rand. Cape Nature 292.090, which is 51%. The department's percentage is 49%. And you will note that, Chairperson, the decrease in split. You would have wanted to see the split of 50-50, but the split is decreasing to 47% versus 53%, mainly due to the fiscal pressures, and also our entity also forecasting to collect a higher own revenue share, which is a situation that we should manage and monitor. Chairperson, the split is further broken down in terms of your conditional grants, your earmarked allocations, conditional grants, EPWP for the province is 4.46 million that goes to the entity. Your earmarked funds of disaster prevention measures, management of wildfires, floods, and other risks, infrastructure upgrades and scheduled maintenance of 41 million. Check, that's what goes to Cape Nature. Department specific, we have RCEP program, which comes to around 12.196 million rand. Compensation of employees for 241 million rand. Sustainable water program for 5.3 Chair. Chairperson, this slide just gives you a split between different programs, how our budget is split. And you will see that program 1 administration is 25.3%, 70 billion rand, which seems to be quite high. But that program is quite loaded. There's a number of sub-programs, including ministry, HOD's office, my office, strategic support. So it's quite bulky, the chairperson. It would look high, that program being administration. Program 2, 7.6%, compliance and enforcement 11.1%, environmental quality 30.1%, biodiversity 4.8%, environmental empowerment services 0.3%, developmental planning 20.1%. Just a split, chairperson, in terms of our budget, how it's split between compensation of employees and payment of capital and goods and services. You will see there that our compensation is quite high at 87%, chairperson. And this is mainly because of we had to absorb the increase, the 1.5% increase for national wage agreement and all other related employee costs, which the fiscus could not fund. Chairperson, is quite high. We have a COE strategy that we've developed to try and manage this cost. Chairperson, the local government transfers in terms of the RCEP program comes to 6 million to the 8 municipalities. Chairperson, this is just a breakdown that aligns the budget with the priority areas, that shows what percentage or what value goes to different programs. You will see on the right there program and sub-program. So it just aligns and shows what budget is allocated to what priority. You will see climate change and water security, 43 million rand, 0.911. So it's just to demonstrate and show alignment, Chairperson, with priority areas. Chairperson, we've agreed with the HOD that as we get also to some of these slides, she will also chip in and just to highlight and present on a slide similar to this one. HOD, may you please continue on to present on the environmental outlook. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is not new information to those committee members who have been with us for a while. We would actually have presented it to you more than once in terms of what is happening in our state of environment reporting. We have a 5-year cycle with that reporting, and we will be doing another round of that in 23-24. But across all of our natural themes, you can see that there's a decline. So those areas that are in red. For the themes where we very much have a human element to it, our human settlements, our waste management, there's improvement. But what we're finding is that the nature of the problem is expanding past the ability of the infrastructure to be able to respond effectively. But we will be able to give you more detail should you want it, as well as the new report when it comes out. Moving on then to state of development planning, it's very important for us to recognize and to be aware of exactly the state of our land packages, our land use, the way in which we've determined how we use our land. Because what we know is that apartheid left us with a very inefficient system that we have been trying to rectify for the past 3 decades. And that still has not been achieved the way it needs to be. One of the issues is obviously the enormous inequality, but then also the fact that we have very inefficient urban sprawl. And this doesn't help when you have people moving away from the city to the outskirts to live on various forms of estates, because the municipality is also required to service those areas, making them incredibly expensive to service. So from our perspective, it's very much about tracking where we're putting our infrastructure, where we're investing and why, so that we make sure that we actually are able to enable our economy and make sure that jobs are provided in the right places. But again, this is something where we have a lot of specific information, so if anyone on the committee would like further, we can present to you on that in particular.
Through you, Chair. Cape Nature is here as well, and the budget is here, HOD. Would you like, the CFO to present?
Thanks very much. I think just very briefly in terms of our... Mohammed, no.
Thanks very much. Not impressed, but anyway, thanks very much, Chair. I think just to briefly look at the revenue of the entity, and although ecotourism income has bounced back quite well for this financial year post the pandemic, we're still fairly reliant on the allocations from the department, from the Treasury via the department, which accounts for 80% of our revenue. And ecotourism income for the year, which is the other significant revenue item, is at 35 million. Moving on to the programmatic split, you will notice that the majority of our budget is split between Program 3 and Program 4, which is our core mandate, and our core mandate speaks directly to the Western Cape priorities of jobs, safety and well-being. The total budget being 364 million for the year. And then finally, the expenditure categories, you'll see that we've got a really good split. We've managed to keep our cost of employment around the 60-40 level. So even though we're an entity that's reliant on staff and feet on the ground in terms of field rangers, conservation assistants, conservation officers, etc., we're still keeping, and we're a big employment, creation of employment opportunities through the EPWP program. We still keep our cost of employment around 60%, with the balance being to goods and services. Obviously, at this point in time, with the situation with the oil price, etc., travel costs, although budgeted at 7%, could see an increase based on the increase in tariffs and fuel. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chair, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation, the 21 slides. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Musomi, and also to Cape Nature. Honourable members, therefore, please, I table then the vote 9 in the estimates of the Western Cape, and please, you will find the relevant pages in the hard copy on page 383 to 438, and those of you that are following on the electronic copy, pages 403 to 458. So if you could give an indication by raising your hand via the MST's function, I would appreciate that, and that will guide me in the order in which you will be getting an opportunity to take part in the deliberations. I give a few seconds for honourable members just to indicate who would like to pose a question at this stage. Thank you. Honourable Bosman, I see your hand.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I was just hoping that the department could perhaps guide us through how they're able to manage with such a small budget, and specifically what the priority in the budget will be for the clearing of alien species, specifically alien species in rivers. If the department could perhaps just highlight some of that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. That was succinct. Honourable Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's a bit of a follow-up on from Member Bosman, and it's really just looking at the presentation now regarding the very small budget for biodiversity, where you've red flagged, the department has red flagged climate change as a concern, and it obviously is a worldwide red flagged concern. Yet biodiversity, we have one of the world's unique biomes in this province, has only been allocated of 13 million. So how is the department going to juggle the intense pressure on biodiversity and oceans, which play such an important role in the sustainability of this province. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Schaefer. Ms. Shippey, over to, I see there's another hand raised. Let me just make sure. Honourable Maran, please. I trust that the officials are making notes of these questions and that they will be able to respond in the order in which it's been posed. So over to you, Honourable Maran. And
thanks, Chairperson. This is actually directed to the MEC. MEC, I haven't heard that you mention anything about the environmental commissioner. Even last week when we have dealt with the issue of solid waste management, and I've also posed the question, there was no response from officials on that particular issue. You know, MEC, that the Premier basically had a public participation process throughout the province that speaks to the environmental commissioner as basically provided within our provincial constitution. And the outcome of that public participation process, basically all of them was that there's a need for environmental commissioner. MEC, and I haven't heard you speak about that. Is there any plans to appoint provincial environmental commissioner? If not, why not? And if, when will it happen? Is there in this particular budget made provision for the appointment of environmental commissioner? That's a 1. 2. We have read, MEC, the other day about a small group of green scorpions that have received their licenses to operate drones. Can you give us the amount of...
I just ask that everybody remains on mute and give the member an opportunity to pose his questions.
The amount of, thanks, Chair, the amount of green scorpions that have passed, Chair, also whether they are operational, if not, why not? And if, Chair, whether there's provision made within this particular budget to deal with that operations. Chair, if they are operational, Chair, have they issued any fines? And if, what is the amount or the total amount of fines that they have issued? Chair, then the last one that goes to the MEC. The MEC in his input basically has spoken about the environmental risk over the next 5 years and also the issue of biodiversity. I agree with the MEC, there will never be enough money. But if you look at the amount of money that's been budgeted to deal with that particular issue, it's like a small change. When the MEC Meneer basically dealt with the budget, in that particular budget, they could find 1 billion rand for the 1,000 LEAP officers within the city of Cape Town to enable them to do their job. And in fact, that's actually the police force of the MEC, which is not a mandate of this province. Are you satisfied, MEC, with the amount of money that's been allocated to deal with this particular issue, a serious issue that speaks to the environmental risk? And if not, what have you done? What will you do in future to make sure that more money will be made available to deal with the issue of environmental risks? Let me first stop, Chair, there, because I've heard you spoke about certain pages and I'm a bit confused on that, but there may be more questions that will come for the department itself. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, honourable members. I'm sure there will be an opportunity for a further round of questions. If you would allow me, I'm going to ask the MEC to respond first, particularly on the questions by Honourable Maran, and then Minister Bradell, if you would be so kind then to hand over to Ms. Shippey for the questions directed at the department. Thank you.
We'll do that, Chair, and thank you to the Honourable Moran for the questions. The question on the Environmental Commissioner must be posed to the Premier's office. The Premier is the custodian of the Constitution, so they're busy with that process. If he wants my personal opinion, because of legislation changes over the years and because of the pressure on the budget, I can't see that the Environmental Commissioner will make any difference within the status of the environment currently in the province. But that's a political debate, and we can have that in the House. The Scorpions, we've got 9 drone pilots. We must just look. Remember, agriculture also got drone pilots, and I know that our traffic officers also invest within that space, and I think it's going to help us going to be a use assistance in monitoring and patrolling and protecting our environment going forward. So I think this program, it was important to invest in it, and we will keep on going to invest in this kind of technology. The finances, Honourable Chair, it's not that simple. I mean, the LEAP officers also speak to safety. Now, at the stage in the budget process, you give and you give and take. Obviously, we'll fight for the environment. Obviously, we'll put on the table that globally climate change is flagged as risk number 1, with cybercrime as risk number 2. But when you sit and the whole budget cycle and the budget and our allocation starts from a national level. So we can start there. And then you must remember that in this province, there's huge pressure on education, on health, on every single sector. From where we sit, obviously, we need to protect our biodiversity. Air pollution is very important, the air quality. Managing and that kind of equipment is very sensitive equipment. So Gottlieb and his department will always look into that and monitor, and we'll always bring a case and make a case. But at the end of the day, somebody must find the balance between all of these needs. Everybody thinks their department is the best and wants more. And we will fight for that. But Treasury must find the balance in between. We will also need to look at how are we going in the future working smarter, and that especially with partnerships. How can we partner with the private sector to do more? I think between myself and the Premier, we're looking at some programs to partner to see if people can help us with the alien eradication program. They make furniture of the alien plants. They can now make material through which you build houses. See how we can pull that pipeline into government. But there's a couple of initiatives that we work on, and we will keep on fighting for our right share within the budget. But where we currently stand, we need to do with the budget that we received, and I've got full confidence in the team around the table. You can also see how Cape Nature has managed to increase their ecotourism. I think that speaks to the quality and actually the investment over the last couple of years within that sector. It bears fruit now. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Acting HOD Karen.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, honourable colleagues, for your questions. It's incredibly difficult to find a balance and to prioritise, and I think our obligation as officials has been to do exactly that. I am going to ask 1 or 2 of my colleagues to come in and add to what I'm going to say. Specifically on the alien clearing, I'm going to ask Gottlieb Arendse to come in on the riverine clearing that his team works on in particular, and Marlene Leross to talk about the biodiversity elements once I've made a few comments, but then also to call on Paul Hardcastle, who is Acting Chief Director today in terms of the environmental governance component, to just talk to us about the green scorpions. It's quite a lot of detail you've requested, so we may need to respond to you in writing, but certainly in terms of whether or not, how many of them passed and whether or not they're operational, I will be asking Paul to respond to that. Just in terms of how we've prioritized, remember that alien clearing is not done mostly by our department. It is mostly carried out through Cape Nature. So they are responsible for the money that we do get. So, for example, the earmarked allocation for the disaster risk reduction around fire break generation, etc., very much goes into that space. But we are also coordinating ourselves with Department of Agriculture, their land care programs, etc. So we try and actually coordinate between everybody who's got a little bit of alien clearing funds. We try to make sure that we put them together so that we can actually get the biggest bang for our buck. And what our green economy team is doing is also looking at those various value chains for the material that's coming from the clearing processes, so that we can actually get to a point where those industries are sophisticated enough and the value chains are developed enough that government doesn't have to foot the bill for all of the alien clearing. But remember too that our municipalities benefit from the water that is gained when we clear the catchments. So we are trying to draw the municipalities into those discussions and into the catchment management discussion as well. With that, I will hand over to Gottlieb.
Thank you, Corin. Thank you, Chair. So just to then further add on, our program deal with mainly the riparian restoration rehabilitation program. And so it's important that we dovetail also with the alien clearing. So part of our program does look at alien clearing. We're very much working with partners on in our intervention. So with the Department of Agriculture, Cape Nature, and where our riparian restoration work is that we are restoring the areas which have been cleared through the alien clearing program, and also maintaining. So we have to, so where we are doing alien clearing as well is to maintain the sites which we have been restoring. As you might be aware, that it takes also a number of years that we continue to work within that areas. For this coming year, there are 6 sites, of which some of the sites are also maintenance sites, so we are maintaining. And that is what we have discovered, that through the restoration work, we actually ensuring that the secondary invaders do not have a chance then, or minimize the chance of them coming up. And therefore, the maintenance work is so important when we are looking at riparian restoration. So our catchments, as you might be aware, from a strategic water resource is in the Berg River catchment and the Breede. So those are mainly where we're working, and especially in the Middle Berg. We're working also and have partnership with related to the Breede in the Hayes River and Riviersonne end. And then maybe years where also Marlene Larosse can come in further also around identified the strategic further water areas and our partners which we have around how their work then link up with this alien clearing, and then if Cape Nature want to also come in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Gottlieb. And I think, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm going to pull together the next question's response, because then Marlene can come in on both of the areas. Honourable Schaefer, thank you very much for your comment. You're absolutely right. Our biodiversity and our oceans are a critical part of us being able to depend on nature and survive those processes. Remembering that our Program 5 is covered in combination by the department and by Cape Nature. So Cape Nature's budget assists and is part of the greater implementation of our mandate across that area. We have undergone a full organizational design process, both ourselves as well as Cape Nature, when we looked at the Western Cape Biodiversity Act, which this committee obviously processed last year through the parliamentary process. But essentially there, what we've tried to do is hone our needs, our legal obligations with particular skill sets and particular staff posts that we would need. Cape Nature has managed to complete its organizational design process and implement it. Unfortunately, the one that was occurring within the department has stalled, and that was really because of a question raised around where the money would come from to be able to actually supply what we need in terms of that skill set and those particular individuals. The department had put together a phased approach, so we would like to have the opportunity to look at that organizational organogram and be able to populate it as and when monies become available and be able to prioritize within that organogram. But we are reliant on the Department of the Premier to actually take that through its final stages to Labour. And it is a very difficult discussion at the moment, bearing in mind how much pressure there is on the COE. So obviously from our side, we don't have enough at the moment. Our organisational design process showed that, but we are working with what we have together with Cape Nature. We partner with as many donors and other institutes that are working for the same goals as we possibly can. But definitely it's about sharing the relationship and optimizing what we do with Cape Nature and with our other partners. Marlene, would you like to come in there? And then I will offer the chance to Dr. Omar if she wants to add anything.
Thank you, HOD. I would like to just then add to the responses for Honourable Bosman and Schaefer, specifically in terms of the invasive alien clearing processes within the province. This committee, well, actually the committee for our specific department has also engaged on the ecological infrastructure investment framework for the province. And given the priority that we are all placing on securing long-term climate resilience in our catchments, the department's undertaken a risk analysis, which we presented to this committee, which helps us be more strategic in our targeting of spending our limited finances. And indeed, those finances are limited. There is too little to solve the problem. And in order to solve the problem, we have to think differently about these roles. So as Ms. Shippey spoke to this particular issue, partnerships are being emphasized. We are leveraging partnerships from NGO sector and private landowners as well to support the strategy, specifically focusing on our priority strategic water source areas. One such example of this is our recent partnership with WWF, focusing on strategic water source partnerships. And the idea is to be within those specific resource areas and to leverage additional partnerships on the ground. We are seeing this as being the most effective way because it's linking directly into the risk owners. And those are often the people living in the catchments that feel these risks, either in terms of water scarcity, fire risk, etc. The other critical issue for the province is being able to coordinate our own investment into these priority areas. So indeed, this committee also deals with agriculture. Agriculture is a major partner in invasive alien clearing as well within the riparian area. Then perhaps just to touch on Honourable Schaefer's observation, absolutely we are in a very difficult position. However, one needs to consider how biodiversity is conserved. And if we leave the conservation of biodiversity just to Programme 5, we will not achieve our outcomes. We are all responsible, all programs contribute to biodiversity management and coastal management. And I point here to the very important work of Programme 7 and the support to municipalities in bedding down and mainstreaming their spatial plans to achieve these outcomes. So again, it's a network model in terms of achieving these outcomes. We do, however, have to highlight, as our HOD has highlighted, the fact that there have been additional legal mandates, for example, in the coastal management arena and specifically in the estuary management arena, and these need to be addressed moving forward through the plan that we have as a phased implementation for the proposed organisational structure for Programme 5. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Acting HOD. In terms of the alien clearing, I think Marlene summarized it very appropriately. I just want to highlight, and I think Honourable Bosman's question or comment was that there might not be sufficient funds for that. And that is a fact. There's no dedicated ring-fenced budget for alien clearing. However, there are strategic partnerships that are now being set up, like Marlene said, through the Water Fund. WWF is a huge player in this sphere, and it assists us in terms of just honouring our strategic plan where we map out the hotspots and heavily alien infested areas for clearing catchments, etc. So what else do we do in this sphere? We also apply to national through the environmental programs, EPWP programs, and you tender as an entity, we tender for these, and we were allocated for this past year 12 million in this regard that goes towards alien clearing. It's job creation primarily, but alien clearing is largely what is done. That is what I can add. The disaster management that the acting HOD mentioned, yes, we get a ring-fence budget of about 10 million. And from that budget, it's fire largely, disasters in terms of fire, and fire breaks are huge in this regard, and clearing aliens that goes with it. So that's what I can add. Thank you, Chair and Honourable Members. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the only outstanding question then was the component of Honourable Moran's question relating to the green scorpions. If Paul Hardcastle. Oh, apologies. Minister says we have answered that.
Thank you, Ms. Shippey, and all your colleagues for responding. Honourable members, there is an opportunity for a second round of questions, comments. May I then just ask a few questions? The first one is on, while we're on the topic of alien clearing, the responsibility for the clearing of rivers. Former member Deirdre Bartman of this committee, I think, brought under your attention the problem, for example, in the Karoo, where aliens quite often grow, in the runoff areas of rivers, etc. And I am concerned that, if the local landowners or farmers are not able to ensure the free flow of water, that this might lead to future flooding, damage. And I think one of the rivers that we all remember from the Laingsburg floods, the Buffelsrivier, it might be one of those where, even if you just leave the dead trees inside the flow of the river, that it might cause damage lower down to breaches and other infrastructure. So perhaps if you could just help us, who are the responsible authorities to ensure that, these rivers are kept clean, that, infrastructure will not be endangered, etc. And then also in terms of the budget of the various entities and the various programs within the department, I see there have been some changes. So you said that you did a work study, particularly, led by the implications of the biodiversity bill. To what extent have you now been able to finalize a new organogram for the department and the various entities? And to what extent could you fund the positions on that organogram? And before you respond, can I hand over also again to Honourable Maran?
Thanks, Chairperson. Just a couple of issues, actually follow-ups. MECD, and I've seen in that newspaper article you've spoken about the helicopter type of drones that deals with the illegal clearing of indigenous vegetation. And I think it's a huge problem, especially when it comes to farmers, for instance, where they just remove those indigenous vegetation. But also in your Woolsley area, MEC, and I've met of black farmers, it's just opposite Dwarsrivier prison, where they basically have indicated they have applied for the movement of those indigenous vegetation. And up till now, they have not received any response. And it's almost 10 years later now. And if we're going to operate like this, you will just find where farmers remove and pay the fines, remove the indigenous vegetation and pay the fines. It's a huge problem, and we need to deal with that particular issue. And I think earlier this year or at the end of last year, Cape Nature, for instance, and I believe there's a huge contestation when it comes to human settlement versus biodiversity in conservation camps. Remember when we went to a oversight visit in Hermanus, for instance, your Mulgood farm. There's actually like nothing left where people have built shacks. Cape Nature have basically I think it was last year, the year before, surrendered a reserve park where people have just invaded that particular area, and the subsequent of that was they also surrendered money that have dealt with security to the Department of Human Settlements. How are we? And it's a joint responsibility, correctly, by Cape Nature and Department of Environmental Affairs and Planning. How are we going to deal with that particular problem as we are moving forward? Because it cannot be that when people invade, we just surrender. How are we going to deal with that particular issue as we are moving forward? Thanks.
Over to Ms. Shippey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen and Honourable Moran. I'm going to talk a little bit about the clearing of rivers and our organisational design process that we undertook. Just one correction, and perhaps I misspoke. It very much was not in response to the Western Cape Biodiversity Act. It's in response to national acts, which have given us the obligations that we've had to then filter down. So our Western Cape Biodiversity Act did not add new obligations or responsibilities. We simply used that to ensure that between Cape Nature and ourselves, the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined. But those are national acts that have required us to do those things. And I'll be calling on Marlene LaRosse to support me with those two responses. And then after that, we can ask if Cape Nature would like to add to that. So let's start with that, and then I will come to Honourable Moran's question. So responsibility for clearing rivers, it's generally and in the first principle, the landowner's responsibility. So it depends a lot on the nature of that particular catchment, who the landowners are, if the landowner is government. Obviously, there's a requirement there, but private agricultural owners as well are required under CARA, under the Conservation of Agricultural Resources Act, to clear their own land. And if they don't, the state may clear it and reclaim funds from them. So from our perspective, it is primarily our relationships with the landowners that becomes so critical. And it's where Cape Nature works very much in the landscape to try and engage with those landowners and assist them and guide them in terms of how they need to manage their land so that everybody benefits, that all elements of that particular environment benefit. So it is something that, we can certainly develop programs to assist further to guide our municipalities as well as our landowners, but everything costs money. And we can only do as much as we can. There are only 24 hours in a day for the staff that we have. But certainly where there are particular situations to advise on, then definitely our landscape managers within Cape Nature, as well as the department, is very willing to engage. And I know that both Marlene Larosse and Wilna Kloppers, as our directors who work in that space, would be happy for people to contact them so that we can make sure we direct people to the right information. In terms of our organizational design, as I said earlier, we were responding to national obligations and changes to national law, and then making sure that that filtered into our Biodiversity Act at the Western Cape level. We have completed the process, so organizational design processes are guided by the DPSA in terms of very specific requirements. So you have to go through step by step to make sure that you've investigated your service delivery model and that you've actually unpacked the staff you currently have, what roles they're in, what you actually need for the mandate, and then start populating. And ultimately, once it's gone through labour and once it's been signed off, you can then match and place the existing staff into the posts that they should be with the new job descriptions. The position that we're at is that the technical reporting was complete and we had not yet engaged with labour. That's the point at which we got questions from the Department of the Premier about budget. And whilst we said that we would be able to phase the implementation, that was not accepted. The response was that we needed to have the full budget available for that new organogram, which of course, under the current circumstances, is almost impossible, I think, for anyone who's needing to make shifts with skills in their particular arena. I will ask Marlene Larosse to come in on this, but just reflecting on the fact that Cape Nature was able to complete its process and the department has been raising and obviously will prioritise now going into 22-23, that we reopen up those discussions with the Department of the Premier so that we can move forward on that particular organogram. Marlene, would you like to add to what I have just shared?
Thank you, Ms. Shippey. I would just like to add perhaps a quantum to the answer that you've given. And effectively, if you look at the current establishment versus the proposed establishment, we have about a third of the capacity that we believe is required to perform the essential legal mandates for coastal management as the lead authority in the province and in terms of supporting the biodiversity management strategy and policy functions that we have as a department. Karen, I wondered if you wanted me to move on to the issues of the unlawful clearing of natural vegetation.
Yes, please do.
The critical issues here, Honourable Chair, are also in relation to where the priorities exist. And as you know, the Provincial Biodiversity Spatial Plan that has been developed by Cape Nature is what we like to call our hymn sheet, together with the National Biodiversity Assessment that we use to inform any decisions. There are specific flashpoints, as you may know, in terms of where we have specific challenges with, let's call it unlawful clearing of natural vegetation, but also where there's a very specific economic drive for certain products. So the Renosterveld, as you know, just because of the nature of the soils there, highly productive soils on the lowlands, have been a specific focus of the department, where we are working with partners, including Cape Nature, to try and work towards compliance promotion, which is far more effective than enforcement. As you know, if you're in the shoes of enforcement, the damage has often already been done to the environment. It's far better to be on the front foot, to promote compliance with your land users and to find more strategic options to looking at where additional land can be used for these agricultural purposes. I mentioned the Renosterveld, extremely threatened ecosystem type in the Western Cape, one which is being prioritised between the agencies in partnership with others to try and move forward. And then also historically and still on our priority is the Sandveld. And you will know that we've been working on the EMF and standards for the Sandveld as a specific focus, which also influences the resources impacting Verlorenvlei. So none of these things you can seal hermetically from one another. They are somehow all related. And using that particular example, you know, the use of more land or plowing more virgin land ultimately will always come with the need to provide for irrigation. And in that particular context of the Sandveld, there is obviously the use of the surface and the groundwater resources, around which there are major concerns in terms of allocations and even potential over allocations. So the opportunities for us to get onto the front foot, we are chasing those, but we do acknowledge that in terms of administrative processes and the burdens for landowners, we've sought very carefully to try and rationalize and modernize these approaches. But I think I'll leave it there for now. I'm not specifically aware of the case which was mentioned in terms of Wolseley, and perhaps I can hand over to other colleagues who would have knowledge of that particular case. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ross. And through you, Chair, I would suggest that if there are any cases where there appears to have been a non-response, to please raise it with the department, because certainly from our tracking, we respond to all of our applications within the stipulated timeframes. And I can assure you that 10 years is definitely about 5 times longer than any stipulated timeframe. So if this is in fact the case, we will respond. It may well be that there's a misunderstanding about what is required. It may be an agricultural permit or something of that nature, but certainly if you raise it with us and provide us with details, we will look into it for you and have a response. Just in terms of human settlements and conservation areas for us, I know that you're referring to the Drift Sands Nature Reserve, and for us this is a very sad moment indeed. We had a rather unique set of circumstances that arose around COVID and around lockdown level 5. As we all know, we've never experienced a lockdown like that before in our lifetimes, and it precipitated a number of things. Obviously, a lot of people losing their income sources, and certainly in Mfuleni, a lot of backyarders unable to pay their rent and being evicted. Not lawfully evicted, but being evicted by those people who own the properties. Because of this, we saw a rapid increase of dwellings, of shelters on Drift Sands itself, initially on the City of Cape Town land alongside the Kales River, but then moving onto the actual Drift Sands Nature Reserve rapidly. And I think for us at the time, it was incredibly difficult to get law enforcement to assist us. We did try to respond. We went to court. We got an interdict. But you will remember that also at that point in COVID, the court ruled that people would have to be provided with alternative accommodation. And bearing in mind the budget that you've just referred to as being far too little for us, having to rehouse over 8,000 families, which was the figure that we were dealing with by September 2020, was something that was just an impossible task. When we were trying to actually ensure that people didn't move on in the first place, we didn't get the support that we needed from law enforcement. There are lots of good reasons why not. At the time, they were overwhelmed with having to enforce the COVID regulations in total. And I know that there were well over 1,000 individual land invasions within the City of Cape Town that in those months. So it wasn't an isolated incident, but we were unable to respond to it the way Cape Nature would ordinarily have responded. They've also since been able to draft a much deeper policy about what to do when you are seeing the early stages of a land invasion. And we've been able to successfully deal with other occurrences on some of our lands or close to Cape Nature held properties. So for us, drift sands is now a story that needs to be resolved. You will note that it was gazetted in January, that the intention is to deproclaim the area so that future land uses can be considered, because at this stage, the lawful status of the land prohibits any other activities from being developed on the site. So that's currently the position that we're in. And I'm not sure if anybody would like to add to that. I'm seeing Dr. Omar feels that it's been covered, but if there are follow-up questions, I'd be happy to respond. Mr. Chair, if you're speaking, you are on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. LaRosse, and I recognize the hand of Honourable Maran.
Thanks, Chair. No, I'm happy with the response, Chair. On the Woolsley matter, I will forward. I will indeed send the information through in terms of that application. Chair, lastly, before I go to the Blue Book, the MEC, and after that I will be finished with the MEC, said that the Premier's office is responsible for the appointment of the Environmental Commissioner. So it's a matter that should be taken up with the Premier's office. But the MEC also said that he got a particular view. And his view is that the appointment of Environmental Commissioner will not basically change anything. That's his personal view. But his personal view comes against a public participation process where thousands of people basically have said that we want that person. Are the MEC now saying that his personal view in terms of the appointment of an Environmental Commissioner, together with the view of the Premier, whether there is any, and I believe there is because they have not appointed the Environmental Commissioner, does it mean that their view weighs heavier than those of thousands of people that have participated in the process, whether the Environmental Commissioner should be appointed or not? And if it was their view, and if it's their view, and if their view cannot be changed, why then have they embarked on that particular process to engage the public, whether there should be this person? So, Chair, the outcome basically was there should be an Environmental Commissioner appointed, and if it not happened, then it means that that particular process was a fruitless expenditure. Basically, knowing that I got my view, it's not going to change anything. Does the MEC's view, personal view, weighs heavier than a public participation process that's been followed by the Premier's office? Thanks.
Chair, can I respond?
Please do.
Chair, it's very simple. The process, the Constitution, the changing of the Constitution, if it's within the Premier's portfolio and they will deal with that there. I gave my personal opinion, and that's my opinion. I also understand cut and paste and certain processes within the domain. I've got an opinion. If you give me tomorrow 12 million rand, there's a lot of things that this department can do with 12 million rand to appoint a person that will not contribute or change anything within the legal framework. But that's a debate we can have in Parliament. That's a political debate. Let's have it in Parliament.
Good, thank you. Thank you, MEC. Thank you, honourable members. Are there any further questions to either the MEC or to the departmental officials? I do not see any hands. Ms. Nikat, our procedural officer, have you received any responses or indications from members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting or that would like to comment on the budget?
No, Chairperson, we've not received anything from members of the public.
Thank you, Honourable Maran. I trust that this is on a new topic.
Yes, Chair. Chair, I'm not sure whether I've heard you correctly when you, at the beginning, when you have spoken, said that in the blue book, in terms of that particular pages, I'm not sure whether you stop at 345. I'm not sure. Can you please assist me? Because the question that I want to ask is 385 onwards.
Correct. It's if you're working from the hard copy, it's you'll find the necessary detail on pages 383 to 438. That's what I said. And you're welcome if you've got any questions on those pages in what is generally known as the Blue Book, or officially the 2022 Estimates of Provincial Revenue and Expenditure.
Thanks, Chair. Can I continue?
Please proceed.
Thanks, Chair. On page 5, Chair, the first paragraph, Chair, and it basically speaks to municipalities that seems to be in breach of and they are polluting the environment. And we want to know what the department is doing in terms of that. Your Mullerton Lagoon, Chair, there's a pollution at Falls Bay that affecting small-scale fishermen, specifically those who are catching snook. There's the Zandvliet wastewater treatment works that where raw sewage that basically flows within the Kales River. So the question basically is, what is the department doing to make sure, and whether there is a budget to make sure that these type of transgressions don't continue to happen? Also, Chair, on 387, Chair, it speaks to the Western Cape government's recovery plan, Chair, and it seems, Chair, if you look at it, that these plans does not speak to each other. 388, Chair. No, not 388. I'll quickly go to it. 388, Chair, that speaks to the human rights and gender responsive practice. My question is that does this department have a GBV or sexual harassment policy? And what measures will be taken in this financial year to strengthen those policies, if it exists, especially in the light what happened, for instance, in the first matter recently? Does this department have a gender-based violence or sexual harassment policy? Then lastly, Chair, page 421, and if you look, for instance, at the budget and the COE, the compensation of employees, it's when it comes to the Department of Environmental Affairs, that particular program took 87% of that budget. Even if you look at Cape Nature, the COE component took 60%. Now here we have, Chair, the department is budgeting over 5 million for consultants. And the bulk of this is used for program 4, 3.7 million. And with so many, Chair, staff, because my understanding is if 87% is for COE, it means there's quite a number of staff. Also, Cape Nature basically said that 60% they got a number of staff, boots on the ground. Why are these skills not insured? Why are these skills not insourced? 5 million rand for consultants. Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Moran. Honourable Moran, if you wouldn't mind, you referred to page 387, but I couldn't quite get the specific question that you've got on 387.
Chair, let's leave 387.
Okay,
now.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. And perhaps if I could just add to Honourable Moran and his questions regarding pollution, particular pollution of water sources, etc. I recall that a number of years ago, in the case of Stellenbosch, when their sewerage plant was still under pressure, fortunately they've since spent some 400 million on an updated and extensions to the sewerage plant, that it was actually the Department of Water and Sanitation that threatened to act against the mayor and the municipal manager. Perhaps if the officials in their response would be so kind also just to spell out to us, when is it the National Department of Water and Sanitation and when is it this department that will be acting against such pollution? Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Shippey.
Thank you very much, and I just want my colleagues Gottlieb Arendse and Wilna Kloppers to pick up the questions around water quality. But I think really just to start in response to that, we follow the Intergovernmental Cooperation Framework Act to start with. So we are always obliged when we pick up a problem to first try and assist, to try and guide, but then to notify them that they are breaking the law and that they need to do something about it. And if none of those activities work, then we do have to go the enforcement route where it is our mandate. And I think, as you've said, and I think certainly with the question that you've raised, Honourable Chair, at the end there are times that it is not our mandate to do so. But it's important for us to follow that procedure so that we do everything in our power to enable the municipalities to be compliant. And if we can't use those support mechanisms to then actually make sure that we go through enforcement and compliance. But if I can hand over to Gottlieb Arendse.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Corin. So I'll just start and call on my colleague Wilna, and if also Ahmad is in here. But just on the issue around Milnerton, there has been an issue of compliance notice and directives to the City of Cape Town. We have looked at also whether part of that notice was for them to then draft an action plan for the intervention. So there's a long list in terms of actions, interventions with the City of Cape Town needed to take, and we meet on a regular basis to monitor the progress of the implementation of these actions. They are short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Obviously, the infrastructure in terms of ensuring that the infrastructure, the recapitalization of the infrastructure, for example, the Potsdam wastewater treatment works, that comes online. And so there is, in terms of looking at the short term, what has currently been done and what progress have been made. So we meet regularly with the City of Cape Town. There is a task team between our Chief Director, the Governance Enforcement Chief Director with the City of Cape Town, Water and Sanitation, the Utilities branch of the city. On the recent issue around the fish, I'll call on Ms. Kloppers, the Director of Pollution and Chemicals Management, just to give an update on that situation, which was now recent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gottlieb and Corin, and thank you, Chair. I think Gottlieb covered a lot of that. It is a complex problem. I think we're all aware that there seem to be an increase in pollution, water pollution incidents, and a lot of that within the City of Cape Town area. And as mentioned, there has been enforcement notices issued to the city for a number of these pollution incidents, and we are following up with them. There are action plans in place for Milnerton, for Zandvlei, for other areas as well, pollution abatement plans. So there are regular meetings to see what progress are being made, but it is in most cases quite a difficult problem. The city has acknowledged recently that the wastewater treatment works are in need of upgrade and extension, and something that should probably have happened a number of years ago already. and that's why it is quite serious at the moment. Then also there are other sources like from dense informal areas with inadequate services, and those pollution sources are quite difficult to manage because it's not being deposited at one specific area, and you can look at that area and put interventions in place. It's a lot of sources that needs to be addressed, also in terms of the living conditions of many people. So that is a lot of that is being covered also by the action plans, and where we try to address things in a short, medium, and long-term basis. There needs to be improvement from contingency measures when load shedding happens and power outages happens, and that leads to pump stations overflowing. So there is quite a lot of issues contributing to the problem. And often this time of year in late summer also, when it's quite hot outside, and even if there is a small incident in the sense of some organic matter into water resources, it basically uses up all the oxygen, and that is what's resulting in the fish deaths. So if there's a pump station overflow of sewage, it could have quite a significant impact. So all of those things are being addressed with the city, but unfortunately it's not something that can be solved overnight. Chairperson, you mentioned also the Department of Water and Sanitation, and we do work closely with them, and in cases where it's applicable, also with the National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. And often, you know, we try to use the legislation that is most specific for that kind of incident. So in the case where there's a wastewater treatment works, the Department of Water and Sanitation needs to issue a license, and then their legislation is usually the strongest in terms of enforcing the license conditions, and we would support them with our legislation from a pollution and perspective as well. So it's most often a joint effort, and where we then also start to see improvement. So I hope that covered most of the concerns around this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kloppers. And before Ms. Shippey appoints somebody to respond to the question on the use of consultants, etc., can I just point out that somehow the video feed from the venue where you are, Ms. Shippey, has been cut. We do still get the audio quite loud and clear, but there it's back. Thank you very much, Ms. Shippey, and we see you again. And please, if you could respond to Honourable Maran's questions.
Thank you very much. I think before we leave the topic of environmental quality, I'm going to just ask Gottlieb to speak to the issue of the budget within Programme 4.
Sorry, Mr. Chippy, can you just, the budget, what I heard, and just please assist me, is that quite a huge portion of the budget going towards COE, but also Environmental Quality Management Programme 4 is also made up of impact management, of which 29 million is towards that, that allocation. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, through you, Chair.
So it was specifically a question of using external parties, so consultants and goods and services, when you have a large COE component.
Okay, so what we have experienced, obviously, with budget cuts over a number of years, that in terms of getting service providers on board has been very diminished over time. And especially also within the Sustainable Water Management Program. But we are obliged still to use service providers when it comes to our calibration of our air quality equipment. There is also standards which we need to meet. And particularly in the environmental quality, our service providers is to assist with the riparian rehabilitation program, as well as the water quality lab services, which we have 42 sites which we routinely monitor, sample within the two catchments, the Berg and the Breede. But we take the sample. So over time, there has been also where we use externals for sampling. But our staff, we had also now ensure more and more our staff have to carry the function regarding the sampling. But we can't do without the laboratory services because we haven't got a laboratory. And so we do need that service outside to outsource that service to analyze our results of the samples which we take. Some of those are also ad hoc samples, which we then use through to assist with our enforcement, compliance, monitoring, enforcement action. So that's generally where our service providers are utilized. But as indicated, that in terms of the allocation has dramatically decreased over time. So it's very small projects in assisting, but mainly it's our staff which carrying out the function. But we do have a huge in terms of the CRE, like across the department, contributing to that amount. And that's also despite that there is also a number of unfunded vacant posts. Thank you, Chair. Hope I addressed the question.
Thank you very much, Chief Director Arnser. So yes, a lot of the money that we have to spend in that particular area is related to those specialized technical services. They're not staff or skill sets that we have within the department because of the nature of the actual work that's being done, as well as the enforcement work that needs to be followed up. The two remaining questions were about the provincial strategic plan and the recovery plan, and then the question about GBV and sexual harassment within the department. So just in terms of the first question, obviously the department works to its strategic plan and the national development plan, as well as our sector plans, both within spatial development as well as environment sector. We, within our priorities, however, need to follow what has been identified within the province as key. And COVID, I think, for all of us, required us to prioritize our priorities. And I think this is where some of the disjunct between the reports is coming, is that none of us anticipated COVID when we were writing our strategic reports a few years back. It wasn't something that we could have foreseen in this particular way. So for us, it's important to articulate how we supply support to each of those elements, whether it's a recovery area or whether it's a priority either from the national development plan or our own strategic plan as the province, to make sure that how we do our work and what we do is connected with our priorities across the province and across the nation. In terms of human rights and gender, we do not have our own GBV policy or sexual harassment policy. We adopt the Western Cape government policy for this, and in fact have our own gender mainstreaming forum who have been working on this topic for about the last 5 years to make sure that people are aware of both gender-based violence as well as the sexual harassment policies, procedures. We have 2 sexual harassment contact officers appointed and whose details have been circulated on numerous occasions to our staff, as well as an annual gender mainstreaming survey which we do to try and determine whether or not people feel that there are instances where they have not been able to come forward, so that we can look at our culture in particular. We believe that we are proactive and that we have clearly shown that we have a zero tolerance approach within the department. And we've in fact recently just asked our staff to again go and attend refresher training on the Western Cape Government sexual harassment policy, precisely because of the incident that we saw, and to make sure that our staff understand that keeping silent is not an option. We need to make sure that we are exposing behavior that is not appropriate within our workplace. and gender-based violence within our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shippey. Honourable members, are there any further questions? I only see the hand of Honourable Maran. Honourable Maran.
Chair, thanks. One follow-up and then one new question, and that will be my last, Chair. I'm not sure, Chair, and I've heard a response that in many cases we have to go to court to force municipalities to comply. Chair, one would like to know, Chair, that those legal costs, who foots the bill, whether it's us, when we take a municipality to court, Chair, and if so, Chair, and I know it's difficult, for instance, to speak how much the budget that deals with legal costs, how much it now, but in this particular budget, because there's other issues also that needs legal action, not only this particular issue. But one would like to understand, Chair, maybe in the previous financial year, and if there's no answer now, maybe a written response, how much basically legal costs, specifically when it comes to the enforcement of the law and compliance, how much it have cost us as a department. Chair, also, and I'm not sure whether Mr. McBain Charles is in this meeting, and I know, for instance, the revoking of licenses will be the last option. Whether there was any consideration to revoke any license of a municipality, whether it comes to your wastewater treatment, whether there was any consideration, or whether any licenses has been revoked over the last couple of years, Chair. And then my last new question, Chair, is that, and the Premier have spoken in his State of the Province address about the new department, the infrastructure department, Chair. And on page 438, payments of infrastructure by category. Chair, is there any talk of this infrastructure work or the infrastructure portfolio of the department that might go to the new department that's announced by the Premier, Chair? And if so, we know, we have discussed the other day, I think it was yesterday, there will be a consultation process, and I'm not sure whether that process have started. If they have started, is there any how much preparation has been put in this particular budget to make sure that there will be a smooth transition of if any department of any portfolio of this department will go to that particular infrastructure department? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Maran, for those questions. Over to you, Ms. Shippey.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Chief Director Gerber to respond to the issue around enforcement of municipalities.
Thank you. Honourable Member Baran, that's a critical question about how do we go about doing the law enforcement and even the criminal prosecution in terms of the municipalities. If you look at page 61 of our new APP, you'll see in terms of the indicators there that we do, we plan to do for this coming year, 275 criminal compliance inspections. Those are the EMI, the Green Scorpion inspections. And that from those, there's 175 administrative notices that's issued. And it's through those means that the unlawful activities are firstly addressed, also with the municipalities, and often that then leads to remediation measures being taken in response to those that administrative action that we take in terms of those matters. So that's a huge number of compliance inspections and of those steps that we take for a very small EMI team. Because yes, we don't want to unnecessarily land up in court for exactly the reasons that you've raised. We don't have the budget to do that. If there are alternative measures that we can use that in much cheaper and much faster deals with the matter, that's exactly what we do. The idea is not to prosecute. The idea is to get the remediation on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then just in terms of the questions around the infrastructure department, at this point, we do not believe that there are any components of ours that are intended to be merged with that new entity. So there won't need to be a transition, certainly not in this financial year. We've not been notified of anything. In terms of our infrastructure, Transport and Public Works continues to be the party that actually responds to our infrastructure needs and requirements as the custodian, and we will await whatever the new entity's protocols and policies are. We will be able to respond to that. Cape Nature obviously is also in a situation where they have their infrastructure maintenance as well as new infrastructure, and that we have yet to be told how this new entity would engage with us. But we understand that the intention is a streamlined process for processing and implementing infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shippey. Honourable members, can I take that as the last responses? Ms. Shippey, you still wanted to respond?
I was catching the eyes of one of my colleagues. I don't have anything to add, but I think Chief Director Arendse may.
Just the question around revoking any of the waste licenses. No, we haven't revoked any waste license. What we have done, we buried waste permits. With the previous regime, they were underwater affairs, they were permits, and we have brought that in line with also the new the Waste Act. So we buried certain of the conditions there, but we haven't revoked. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arendse. Thank you, Ms. Shippey. I do not see any further hands. Honourable members, your last opportunity to raise hands. None. So with that, can I ask for some closing remarks, perhaps in the reverse order, first of Ms. Shippey and then MEC Bredell?
Thank you very much. And from my side, I always relish the opportunity to be able to share our perspective and our work with the Standing Committee. I think it's incredibly important for us to share with you how much passion goes into the work that we do from our staff, and how, whether it's a compliance or enforcement matter, or whether it's a partnership that is blossoming and growing from an idea that we can work together and make a better life, there are hours and hours of people's heart passion going into the work that you see presented, and sometimes very glibly in a slide or two. So from my side, thank you for the questions, because it also gives us the opportunity to dive a little deeper with you in exactly what we do and how we fill our time. So I think really just thank you for the questions, and there are one or two obviously that we will need to go and get more detail so that we can respond once we have the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. Yeah, from my side, it's always a privilege and a pleasure to be part of this department and Cape Nature. As you would have picked up, that we've got people with a passion, people that need to secure the environment for future generations, and we also value the interaction with the Standing Committee. We understand your oversight role, and to Member Maram, I'll see you in Witzenberg in the streets, and we can take the political discussion there further. Thank you.
I will wait for you.
Thank you. Thank you, MEC. Thank you, Acting HOD and all your colleagues. If we look at your budget, we see that it's not keeping up with inflation. We wish you well. Certainly, you know, the pressure is on you to keep on working smarter and smarter. And in considering the budget vote just now, please do not see this small increase as any sign, I believe, of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament of not recognizing the importance of your work I just think that quite often, unfortunately, your work is of a longer term nature, and sometimes immediate pressures are first attended to. And this is really a very sorry state of affairs, that our provincial budgets had not kept up with inflation, including with the increase in the demographics of the Western Cape, the pressures on the environment through the ways in which we live, etc. But we wish you, including the staff from Cape Nature, everything of the best. Please know that we appreciate your hard work. It doesn't go unnoticed, and we really wish you everything of the best for this upcoming financial year. And with that, MEC and officials, you are welcome to log off, and hopefully you'll be able to take the lift down to the ground floor. And I see it's not yet the end of your working day. I do know that many of you don't adhere to normal office hours, so hopefully you will feel that you can still move a few mountains, by way of speaking. So, honourable members, I'm just going to give a few moments for the feed from that room to be cut, should they so wish. And then, honourable members, I would like your opinion on this vote, whether you believe that we can support this vote number 9 in the 2022 estimates. Thank you very much. Good.
Chair?
Thank you. I heard a voice, Honourable Bosman, but I heard somebody else's voice. I see Honourable Bosman's hand, and then I see that Honourable Schaefer is also unmuted. Honourable Schaefer, would you like to go first?
Sorry, I was just waiting for that lull in silence. I think you asked for us to support the vote, if that was your question to us. If so, I'm proposing supporting the vote.
Good, thank you very much. Honourable Bosman.
Chair, I want to second that and also commend the department for doing quite a bit with very little money.
Thank you very much. Is that the majority view? Is it a unanimous view from this committee?
Is it only me who's against?
Honourable Maran, I haven't heard anybody being against it. You're welcome to raise your hand.
Chair, no, we are against it for one of the simple reasons that the environmental commissioner, and no provision made in this particular budget to appoint such a person. The ANC cannot support this budget vote 9, Chair. And if my opinion is the minority, Chair, I want it to be captured as per Rule 9 of the standing rules, to be captured within the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Maran. Honourable members, if I therefore can summarise, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me as if the committee, after having deliberated on this adjustment budget, or sorry, on this budget, that the majority of the members present support the vote, and that the ANC, being represented by Honourable Maran, therefore wants their minority view not to support this vote also to be reflected in the committee's report. And I see our ever-efficient procedural officer, Ms. Nikak, has already prepared a draft report for consideration. Honourable members, can we then consider the report? And I'm going to read through it for the record. Report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning on vote 9, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill, in brackets B2-2022, dated the 16th of March 2022 as follows. The Standing Committee on Agriculture, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning, having deliberated on the subject of vote 9, Environmental Affairs and Development Planning in the schedule to the Western Cape Appropriation Bill in brackets B2-2022 referred to it in accordance with Standing Rule 188 reports that it supports the vote. In accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress expressed its minority view that it does not support the vote. Honourable members, that is the report in front of this committee. Can I get an indication from you whether this report accurately reflects the views of this committee this afternoon? Honourable Bosman?
Yes, Chairperson, I think it does reflect the view of the committee that the majority of this committee supports the vote.
Good, and that the report is an accurate reflection. Honourable Schaefer?
I support that the report is an accurate reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. General agreement on that? Good.
I agree, Chair.
Agree. Good. Unanimously then adopted. Thank you very much, honourable members. Honourable members, I want to say thank you very much to each and every one of you for bringing us this far, also for your active participation and the questions that you've put to the department in considering this vote in front of us. This brings us to point 5 on the agenda, which is a general point. Are there any matters that any member would like to raise at this point? I do not see any hands. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the last item on the agenda. Sorry, Ms. Niekerk.
Chairperson, just a gentle reminder not to forget about resolutions if there are any.
Yes, that is under general. That any resolutions that honourable members would like to make? None, it seems. Thank you very much. Honourable members, that brings us to the last item on the agenda. And that is my privilege then to thank you all, as I've said, for your active participation. Thank you also to Honourable Schaefer for standing in as an alternate member for a colleague in this meeting. Thank you also for your active participation and presence. And honourable members, I therefore wish to wish you a very good afternoon. And thank you again. A particular word of thanks to all our support staff who always allow us to be able to deal with these meetings, even though we are not physically present. I think with their support, we are able to really perform and deal with these items quite efficiently. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm closing this meeting.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you.